Samuel chapter 18, verses 9 to 15, as Deacon Jonas read. The title of this passage is God's ultimate control over the events of our lives. In the sense, there are many things in our lives that goes on. We struggle, we try to obey God, we try to be good Christians, we try our best. Many times we fail. And sometimes many things that we do is not because of us, but it's also because of the people we live with, because we are not alone here in what we do. Our families, church members, the place we work with, everybody influence us too. Everybody influences us too. So it's not easy. And this passage is talking particularly about one of David's son, Absalom, the third son of David. So this passage is just talking about the end part of where David's third son, Absalom, dies. But there's a long episode of what was going on. Even in this passage, Joab is a cousin of Absalom. And Absalom was killed by his cousin Joab. Joab was one of the commanders of David. David had 3 commanders to lead his armies, and Joab was one of them. And Joab was not simply a commander, but Joab also very much influenced King David. And we see that in this book of 2 Samuel 2. So, as the title, in this title, what I'm trying to make us understand or notice is that God is sovereignly working in every events of our lives too, not just King David and his sons. That's one. Secondly, through this, we will also learn a little bit about David and his son, Absalom, so that we can also apply something or not do something in our lives. So, just to connect to what we have been doing Sunday after Sunday, we learned about Adam and Eve, we learned about Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Then we have come to this place where now the people of God are one nation called the Israelites, the nation of Israelites. And God appointed judges, around 12 plus judges God appointed to take care of his people. Then the people later, after Samson, they started asking, we need a king. And then we saw it last Sunday, God was not really happy. But God said, remember, you don't know what you're asking for. When you have a king, the king will own everything that you have. Your people, your family members, sons or so, will become his army. They will have to serve the king. Are you really sure you want a king? But the people said, we want a king like the other nations around who are not God's people. We want a king. For example, Egypt, Pharaoh was like the king, like a god. We want to see someone with our eyes who will save us, who will protect us, who will provide us, like the Egypt and others. We want a king. And God was not very happy. But God said, if you want it, so be it. Amen to it, so be it. I'll give you a king. So God appointed Saul, and Saul became a king, the first king in the history of God's people. So God appointed. But again, we saw that Saul did not obey God, so God removed him. So God, we have choices that we make in our situations, but God still is in control. He picked Saul to be the first king, and he was the one to remove Saul from being a king. Then, after Saul, God appointed David, and then starts this story. David had around 20 sons, or even more. But if you calculate, roughly you can calculate 20. But think around 20 sons, and Absalom was the third son. David was a successful king. He obeyed God. The Bible told that he was man after God's own heart. That means he was very close to God. The heart of God and David's heart were almost similar. What God wanted, he desired. He was so close to God's heart. That was what David was. And David was a successful leader to lead his people. Resilience is one thing about David. Never gave up. He was so many times attacked, but never gave up. He always won because God was with him. But in that victorious life of King David as a good leader, many people like the character, the story of King David today. But in David's home, we see it was very chaotic, so much confusion. Sons were fighting with each other. Solomon killed his brother Adonijah. And here Absalom was killed by his cousin Joab. And Absalom killed his brother Amnon. Within the family and the relative, they're just killing each other. So in the personal life, it was very chaotic. Even within David's wives, you see the story. So much of pain. So that was the situation that was going on. And also we see, among David's sons, they were fighting for becoming the king. And we see in David's time, when he was alive, 3 sons died in David's lifetime. 3 sons died. Absalom died. And we see Amnon died. And also Daniel was a child, not the prophet Daniel in the book of prophet, not the prophet, a major prophet that we address, that's called Daniel, not that prophet Daniel, but David had a son by the name Daniel. So he also died during David's lifetime. So think about, as a father or mother, your children dying, and the death was not a good death. It was either God's punishment because you did something wrong, or because one of your son killed another, or your relative killed another son. That was the case. And right after King David's death, again another son died. Adonijah died. He was killed by King Solomon, that we remember him as the wisest king and the richest of all. He killed his own brother Adonijah for power. But we're reading these things, we see how much chaotic confusion, hatred within the same family. Today we call ourselves the Church of God. Church, within ourselves itself, though we love God, though we're blessed, we are no difference, or we are not free from this kind of situations. Sometimes it goes very ugly that we hate to even remember one another, even if we are very closely together as a family. So that was the situation that was going on. But as I've mentioned, God is still in control, as it was prophesied that through David, the Messiah would come. The Christ would come. It was fulfilled. No matter the confusion, no matter David's son killing each other and dying, still through Solomon, Jesus Christ came later. So that speaks, or that tells how in control God is. Some people think God is confused because of so complex life we live in. Just one family fighting, confusion. No. God is not like that. God in heaven, he's not confused. What to do. He's not. God knows everything. He's in control. He's perfectly not chaotic, but perfectly in his sound mind. He's executing, he's completing, fulfilling his plans. In other words, God is fulfilling the prophecies he gave to his people, one after another. So that's the God we worship. That's Yahweh we worship. So that's the situation that we go through. Some of us might think, oh, Solomon, but Solomon was not really a good guy because he had many wives, 700 plus 30, that's inclusive of concubines, which are not wives. Well, we must also consider that when the Bible was written, we have the book of Ecclesiastes, Proverbs, Song of Songs. Song of Songs was, as we all know, it's a book written for lovers, man and woman, expression of the desire and the love. Song of Songs was written when Solomon, or I could say King Solomon, was younger. At that point of time, he wrote that. And later on, the book of Proverbs was written as he started getting more matured. He wrote about now wisdom, how to live a good life, well-being, common sense. What's the good way of living on earth? That became his focus now. It's not about lovers, romance anymore. It changed to about wisdom. As we grow older, we start looking for wisdom now. That was the mentality King Solomon was moving. How to live a good life. How to live in a way with wisdom for our well-being in our daily matters of life. That was the next focus. Then later, as Solomon grew older, well advanced in age, he wrote the book of Ecclesiastes. The book of Ecclesiastes is focused on God. The focus changed to God. Before he talked about romance, younger time, man and woman admiring each other, then the next focus became on wisdom of life. Then ultimately, as he grew older, the focus came back to God. As we know in Ecclesiastes 12:13, it says, at the end, what matters is for us to fear God and obey God. That's the focus of the book. So from there we can also know what was Solomon's mentality or relationship with God at his final days. So anyway, the point is, God still used Solomon among all the hopeless sons fighting with each other. God still used Solomon, and through that the Messiah came. So we see that God in control. So that is the background of God's sovereign work and how God is in control. And now we come specifically to Absalom. Now we enter the story of Absalom. Absalom was the third son of King David. Absalom was prideful, never gave up, and also disobedient. We see that he did not honor his father David. But on the other hand, you see that Absalom also had taken justice in his hand. When his sister was physically violated by his other brother, Amnon, he took justice in his hand. King David never expressed any forms of justice against his son at the expense of his daughter being physically violated. But Absalom stood up and tried to punish his other brother who physically violated his sister. So in some sense, we see that he tried to take justice in his own hands, no doubt, but he is a person who tries, maybe he had a zeal for leadership to take justice in his hand, violating his father's authority. So that was the situation of Absalom. And also Absalom had the ability in some ways to exhort people, attract people to come to him and serve under him. We saw that Absalom did that. There were a huge number of armies that followed him to fight against King David, the famous King David that everybody knew, who defeated Goliath and also many battles. And also they knew God was with David, but still they followed Absalom. So that was the personality of Absalom. That was what he was. That's in that story, in this passage, we have another character called Joab. Joab was a nephew of King David. In Chronicles it's mentioned that he's a nephew of King David, which means he was the cousin of Absalom. So Joab was not just a commander, but Joab was a person that King David, to some extent, listened. The first time when King David and Absalom relationship was not good, that is right after Absalom killed his brother Amnon. He ran away because he killed his brother Amnon, who violated Absalom's sister. At that point of time, Joab was the one who convinced King David to let Absalom come back. Don't send your son away like that. As a father, bring him back. Stop that attitude. You are grieving for your son, Amnon, but don't kick away or cast away your son, Absalom. Joab was saying, as a father, don't do that. So listening to Joab, David agreed. And that's when Absalom came back. So that's one part of Joab. But this time, during the war, King David told Absalom and the other two commanders, please fight against them, but spare Absalom. That means please don't kill Absalom. Don't harm him. But this time it's a twist. Joab is the one who goes ahead. Overriding means ignoring King David's order or command or request. Ignoring that, he goes ahead and throws 3 javelins and kills Absalom. So there's a twist again. So Joab, as we can see, Joab is a person who tries to go by justice. So one side we see King David as a father, knowing that Absalom was wrong, still he tried, as a father, he tried to ask his commanders to spare, to let go Absalom. On the other hand, we see Absalom, disobedient as ever, so disobedient and engrossed in leadership, kingship. We can also know today as leaders or maybe Christians how much many times we fight for leaderships. We really want to be the leaders. We want to be the final word, have the final say of everything that we do. Through this story too, we can also learn being in a leadership does not always mean we are blessed by God. There are many times we are in the leadership by our own strengths, our own force. We snatched leaderships to be in the leaderships. It's not always God's plan or God's providence. But through the story of Absalom, we see Absalom not the chosen one. He went to many extent of humiliating his father in front of all the public by doing very shameful act in front of everyone that we know. And also the only person that so strong that even King David fled Jerusalem because of his son Absalom. But ultimately we saw the destiny of King Absalom. He was killed. His story ended. So as a reflection, as we're learning this, as a reflection, a leadership that we strive for, we can, in our own ability, get that position, or maybe in any project that we do. But whatever is not of God will ultimately not last forever. That's one. Secondly, it may last too. It may last too, but it will never glorify God. It will never have that joy, the peace of God in that form of leadership. And the people who follow that leadership will also never have the heart for God. That can be also in our church. It can be also in a mission work that we do. And as we all know, we're all experienced. We're not new in mission. We're not new in how church works. We're not new Christians. We know and we have heard of gruesome stories among Christians, in mission works, in churches too. So this is also another second call, a reminder for us that God is in control of every situation of our life does not necessarily mean that God will always bring us good things, bless us. That does not always mean. God is in control also means God will also give justice. So when we say God is in control of every situation in our life, does not always mean that no matter how much suffering and trials or confusions we have, God is always going to bring us good things, make us feel good, peaceful, unity. He'll bring unity. It's not only that. When we say God is in control of every situation or events in our lives, it also means that God, being merciful, also has justice. He brings justice too, not only for unbelievers, but as the Bible teaches, actually within the church itself, God's first, He corrects. And the word used in the Bible is chastise. Since God loves us like a father, He chastises His children. And sometimes when God corrects us, it's not easy. It's very hurtful, very shameful. It's not easy. So that's what we can learn from here. And the last point is Joab deciding to obey King David, or is it time for him to kill Absalom? And for the servant, whether to listen to King David's order not to kill Absalom, or to listen to the commander Joab to kill Absalom. That's a big question. That's a big question. Like that in our lives too. We don't work alone. We are accountable. We have seniors that we report to. We have others that we listen to their orders, commands, or their advice. Sometimes there are conflicting advices, conflicting commands. At that point of time, whose do we listen to? That's also a question. Not that we are bad many times, but we don't know whom to listen to when there are two different conflicting commands or orders. The question is, how do you decide? Do you simply by default listen to the superior, most senior one? Or what do you do? That's left on us to decide. And that's case by case. That's case by case. But for me, my suggestion would be, at that point of time, we know the truth sometimes, but sometimes in the context we can't understand what to apply. But if we know the context, we know what to do. Choose what is right. Choose what is right. That's godly, that's right. But at the same time, please let us use wisdom in such a way so that two persons that have asked us to do conflicting things must not be offended. Must not be offended. So as a summary, as a conclusion, once again, from this story, we're not just learning the story of Absalom, Joab, how he executed or killed Absalom, and how David grieved, but how David as a leader had to get up again and minister to the Israelites. But we're also seeing, taking backward through the history from the beginning, how, and also fast forward today and in the future, how God is sovereignly working with His mercy, His blessing, but also His justice. So remembering that today in a church, in a mission work that we do, in a respective work that we do Monday through Fridays, our family life, everything that we do, let us remember that sometimes when it's very hard for us because of certain things, let us not get hopeless and say, my life is over, let us remember that God is still in control. And if we continue in that time to obey God too, God will bless us. We'll see God using us. But if we compromise, means choose not to listen to God, then we know that God is good, so God will also do justice to our wrong actions. So as a conclusion, let's focus on God, remember God in every situation of our life. Shall we all rise up and sing the song, All the Way My Savior Leads Me?